She wasn't supposed to be there. In fact, everything in that hallway pointed her in another direction. The signs, the arrows, even the number on the door. But Rachel walked in. She turned the doorknob with a trembling hand, unaware of her mistake. And when her eyes met the inside of that room, something deep within her whispered, "Stay." The room was empty. No occupied bed, no machines beeping, no sharp smell of medicine. Just silence. A heavy silence, almost sacred. In the corner of a worn-out chair sat an open Bible, weathered, marked, as if someone had left it there. For someone, though it didn't say who. She took a step. Then another, and as she approached the chair, the air around her shifted, as if time had slowed down, as if someone had just left, or was about to return. In the middle of the yellowed pages, a line of blue ink highlighted a verse she didn't recognize. It wasn't a famous scripture. It wasn't a well-known promise. But as she read, Rachel felt as if someone had looked straight into her soul. She dropped to her knees, not by choice, but because something inside her had finally let go. And it was in that moment she realized. The mistake that brought her to that room wasn't a mistake. It was a calling. What Rachel didn't know was that the Bible had been left by someone who had also prayed for healing, and that the psalm marked inside had passed through other hands before it ever reached hers. But that you'll only understand at the end. Because sometimes, God hides miracles in places we only find when we get lost. If this story has already touched your heart, write the name of someone who needs healing in the comments. Maybe this prayer is being written for them too. Rachel wasn't someone who allowed herself to break easily. She had learned young that crying in public was a waste. That faith, sometimes, was simply standing when everything told you to fall. That's why, in the last 2 weeks, since her mother had been admitted with a strange, unnamed diagnosis, Rachel had kept it together. Meals, medication, talks with doctors, fresh clothes, night shifts with her aunt. She held the routine like a shield. But that morning, something had changed. Her body moved, but her soul felt dislocated. The hospital hallways, once familiar, now felt tighter, as if the building itself was tired. The elevator took too long, and she exhaled deeply, almost asking the ceiling for help. In her arms, she carried a bag with her mother's favorite sweater, the devotional she read every day, and a newly bought hairbrush. It was supposed to be just another visit, one more attempt to preserve dignity in the middle of chaos. But that was when everything shifted. Stepping out of the elevator, Rachel turned right like she always did. But distracted or simply exhausted, she stopped in front of a different door. 512 instead of 516. She didn't notice the detail. She pushed the door open without thinking. Didn't check the name on the patient board. She simply walked in. That was when the silence felt different. The room wasn't just physically empty. It felt spiritually hollow, but not abandoned. The curtains were open, sunlight pouring in like a golden veil. A dried bouquet sat in a small vase. A slightly crooked chair stood by a neatly made bed. And that Bible, resting on the chair, as if waiting for someone. Rachel hesitated. Part of her wanted to leave, fix the mistake, avoid embarrassment. But something in the air pulled her in, as if she'd crossed a hidden border between chance and purpose. She looked at the Bible again. It was open, and there was a folded page marking a place. Maybe a patient forgot it, she thought. But why was the page underlined? And why that verse? She stepped closer, slowly. The chair's fabric was worn, as if someone had sat there for many days. The Bible smelled old, like paper, time, and embedded faith. Rachel reached for the edge of the book and felt a chill run down her spine. As if for a brief second, someone had whispered her name, though no one else was there. Her eyes fixed on the highlighted text. The words seemed to pulse. She read out loud, almost unintentionally, "Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am weak." Her voice cracked. She tried to continue, but couldn't. She closed her eyes, and everything she had been swallowing for weeks finally surfaced. That it wasn't just about her mother. It was about her, about the fear she carried but never spoke of, about praying and feeling unheard, about the faith she didn't want to lose, but no longer knew how to hold. Lord, if you're still listening, show me anything, a word, a sign, a whisper. Show me I'm not alone. The plea came out weak, but in the silence that followed, she heard a faint sound, like the creak of old furniture settling. No one was there, but the feeling was unmistakable. She was not alone. Rachel remained on her knees for several minutes, as if she were waiting for that Bible to answer her, as if the atmosphere in that room mattered more than being in the right one. Only later, when she stood and saw the number on the door, did she realize she was in the wrong place, or in exactly the place where God wanted her to be. But what Rachel didn't know, was that this Bible wasn't waiting for someone for the first time. Rachel left room 512 slowly, almost regretful she'd gone. There was something in that space that felt stuck to her skin, like spiritual dust. She walked to room 516, where her mother slept, exhausted from the morning's medications. She placed the bag on the chair and stood there for a moment, just watching the face of the woman who had once been her refuge, now fragile, sunken into the sheets like a feverish child. She tried to smile, brushed her mother's hair gently, adjusted the blanket, but said nothing. Her mind was elsewhere. The image of that open Bible, the marked page, the warmth she'd felt in her hands. It all still echoed inside her like a distant drumbeat. Later that afternoon, standing in the parking lot, Rachel hesitated before getting in the car. She closed her eyes, leaned her head back against the seat, and took a deep breath. For some reason, she didn't want to leave. Then, without planning, she went back upstairs to the 5th floor. When she reached the hallway, room 512 was closed. Lights off. No sign of the Bible. She tried the door, locked, knocked softly, but no answer. She walked to the nurse's station and asked casually, trying to keep her voice even. "Hi, sorry to bother you. Just a quick question. Who's in room 5? The receptionist typed something into the system, looked at the screen, and furrowed her brow. "That's odd. That room's been vacant. No one's been in there since last Wednesday." Rachel felt a chill crawl up the back of her neck. "Are you sure? I went in this morning. It was open." The woman looked surprised. "Open? It shouldn't have been. Housekeeping only unlocks it when prepping for a new patient. But no one's been assigned to that room." Rachel thanked her, said something vague, and walked back down the hallway. She stood again in front of the door, touched the wood gently. There was nothing else to see but inside her. Something had shifted. In the days that followed, Rachel visited her mother more frequently, not out of duty, but out of something she couldn't quite name. And each time she came, her eyes would drift toward room 512. Always locked, always quiet, until one rainy afternoon, she saw an older nurse walking out of the wing with a stack of linens. Rachel approached casually. "Hi, sorry to bother you. Do you know room 512? The woman smiled. "Oh yes, I was in charge of it several times. Why do you ask?" "Well, a few days ago, I walked in by mistake. I saw a Bible open on the chair. A psalm was underlined. But later, it disappeared, and I was told the room was empty. I just wondered if maybe someone forgot the Bible." The nurse paused for a moment. Her eyes softened, almost misty. "Ah, so you found it?" "Found what?" "That Bible. It belonged to a patient named Grace. Sweet elderly lady who stayed there for 2 weeks, so frail, but with a faith that made your throat tighten. She spent her days praying for others. Sometimes, we'd hear her talking to herself, but she was really talking to God." Rachel felt another chill. "Did she pass away?" "Yes. But before she did, she called me in. Asked me to leave her Bible open in that room. Said God told her someone would come through, and that the person would need those words more than anything." Rachel swallowed hard. "But, why that psalm?" The nurse smiled. "I asked her the same. She told me because no one expects to find healing in the middle of pain, but that's exactly where it is." Rachel couldn't reply. She simply nodded, her eyes now welling with tears. That night, back at home, she dreamed of an older woman's face. Not clear, but peaceful. The woman handed her something. A piece of paper, with a single verse written on it, the same one Rachel had read in the hospital. She woke up with her heart pounding, and the name Grace echoing in her mind. In that moment, Rachel knew. The Bible hadn't been hers, but the message was. That psalm had been sent with a purpose, and she was the one meant to receive it. But what Rachel still didn't know was that the promise wasn't just meant to comfort, it was meant to prepare. Because the healing that was coming wouldn't be only for her mother. The next day, the hospital looked the same. Cold hallways, mechanical sounds of respirators, the tired whispers of voices passing by. But Rachel was no longer the same. There was a new urgency inside her. Not panic, more like something was forming in the unseen. And she knew she had to keep going. In the hospital cafeteria, sipping nearly cold tea, Rachel decided to dig deeper. As she called the main office and asked for information about the patient named Grace, the response was brief. "We're not allowed to share details about deceased patients." She hung up, disappointed but not discouraged. Volunteers, security guards, cleaning staff, everyone she spoke to gave her a new piece of the puzzle. One nursing assistant said, "Grace used to write Bible verses and tuck them into the pockets of nurses' scrubs." A hospital psychologist recalled seeing Grace praying in the room of a terminal patient she didn't even know. And a young intern, eyes filled with tears, admitted she still kept one of those handwritten verses. "The Lord upholds those who are falling." Rachel wrote everything down. She absorbed it like someone collecting crumbs left behind by an angel disguised as an ordinary woman. It felt like Grace's story had been scattered across the hospital in small fragments, waiting to be gathered. The next morning, something unlikely happened. When Rachel walked into room 516, she found her mother sitting up in bed, reading for the first time in days. Her eyes were not empty. Her face, though pale, carried something new. "Hope, Mom, are you feeling okay?" "Better. I dreamed of your father last night. He was smiling, told me not to be afraid, and when I woke up, I wanted to get out of bed." Rachel moved closer, tears forming in her eyes. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, honey. But what happened to you? It seemed lighter since yesterday." Rachel smiled, but didn't answer. Some blessings need to grow quietly before they become testimony. That afternoon, she returned to the 5th floor, and to her surprise, the door to room 512 was slightly open. Heart racing, hands sweating, steps hesitant, she gently pushed it. The room was still empty, but there was a new detail. On the same chair, the Bible was gone. But now there was a white envelope. No name, no sender. No sender. She looked around. No one. Took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, a single sheet with shaky handwriting, like it had been written by aging hands. If this word has reached you, it's because you've been chosen to carry it forward. Psalm 6. Read it aloud, then leave this message for the next one who needs it. Rachel felt the floor shift beneath her. It was real. The Bible, the dream, the woman named Grace. Everything was now converging in that moment. With trembling fingers, she opened the Bible app on her phone and searched for the psalm, her heart pounding like a war drum. She took a deep breath and read, Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me in your wrath. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. Her voice cracked, but stayed steady, as if something beyond her was speaking through her. After the reading, Rachel sat in the chair and closed her eyes. She felt the silence wrap around her again, but this time it wasn't emptiness, it was an embrace. She prayed not for immediate healing, not for visible miracles. She prayed for courage, for faith, for understanding. And in the middle of that prayer, something happened. It wasn't a vision, it wasn't an audible voice, but it felt like Grace's words became presence. Like someone was sitting next to her in the empty chair, her mind flooded with faces. A friend with depression, a cousin recovering from an accident, a coworker who'd lost her child. Then, as if guided by unseen hands, Rachel picked up the envelope and wrote in her own handwriting, "This promise is for you too." Psalm 6. Read it, believe it, and pass it on. She placed the note back in the same spot where she'd found the first one, and left the room with steady steps. Like someone who had just accepted a mission. In the hallway, she looked back. The number 512 looked like more than a room. It looked like an altar. And no one knew that the next morning, another patient would be brought into that same room. But what that new person would find wouldn't just be an envelope. It would be a legacy of faith. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. No appointment, no scheduled visit. But something pulled her back like a string tied to her chest. She climbed the stairs calmly, though her heart beat faster with every step. As she walked past the hallway on the 5th floor, her eyes went straight to the number on the door, room 512. It was closed. The hallway light reflected softly on the silver doorknob. No sound inside. She stood still for a few seconds, like someone visiting a sacred grave. She didn't need to go in. What had been given to her there was already sealed in her soul. But that morning, Rachel had another destination, the nurses' lounge. She found Nurse Carla sitting in the break room, the same one she had spoken 2 days earlier, the one who had cared for Grace. Rachel greeted her with a timid smile. "Do you have a minute?" Carla nodded, as gentle as always. And so Rachel told her everything. The wrong room, the Bible, the note, the psalm, the strange feeling of being led, how her mother had begun to improve. Every detail, shared with the kind of emotion that only comes from reliving a miracle still fresh in the heart. The nurse listened silently, eyes focused, posture respectful. When Rachel finished, Carla took a deep breath and walked over to a small cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a worn little notebook, with a floral cover and pages stained by ink and time. "This belonged to Grace," she said, handing it to Rachel. "She gave it to us before she passed. Said it held prayers she'd written for each room in the hospital, as if she somehow knew who would occupy them." Rachel opened the notebook with trembling hands. On every page were made-up names, described situations with an almost frightening level of accuracy. Tired woman carrying her mother's pain. Daughter who lost her faith but still hums softly while folding laundry. Someone who will enter the wrong place and leave with the right word. She froze at that last line. Her breath caught. "This was written before I came here?" she asked, her voice breaking. 3 days before she died. Grace didn't know who you were, but it looks like God did." Tears rolled down Rachel's cheeks effortlessly. She was standing in front of something bigger than coincidence, bigger than fate. She was standing inside a story written by divine hands, with Psalm 6 at the center of the promise. That afternoon, she went home with the notebook in her lap, holding it like a sacred relic. She sat on her bed, opened the sacred text again, and read out loud, reverently, "Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony." This time, she understood. The psalm wasn't just a cry. It was a confession of human frailty, and a call to divine mercy. It was the bridge between unspeakable pain and the God who answers even in silence. Rachel closed her eyes and prayed, not just for her mother. She prayed for all the names she'd seen in that notebook, for every room, for everyone who, like her, had been lost, and found by what seemed like a mistake, but was really divine direction. That night, she wrote a new note. Same blue pen, same handwriting. Folded it carefully and wrote on the front, "For whoever comes after me." Inside, she included the same verse, but added a new phrase. "Healing doesn't come when everything makes sense. It comes when you believe, even when you don't understand." The next morning, she returned to the hospital. Room 512 was being prepped for a new patient. Rachel slipped in quietly, placed the note on the chair, and left without saying a word. But something in her steps said everything. She had been changed, and now, she was part of the chain. The miracle she received was now a miracle she passed on. What Rachel didn't know was that the next patient who would enter that room was also on the edge of giving up, but the message left by a stranger would become exactly the promise they needed to hear. In silence, Rachel placed her hand over her heart. There was no music, no church, no visible altar, but she knew that moment was sacred. The hospital room, filled with fluorescent light and the scent of disinfectant, now felt like heaven stretched across the floor. She grabbed her phone, opened the Bible app, and found the psalm again. She read aloud, with faith, with vulnerability, with her soul uncovered. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. With each word it felt like something moved within her. It wasn't just about the body, it was about her tired soul, about hope that was nearly dead, about fear pretending to be reasoned. Rachel closed her eyes. And then, she whispered a prayer not found in any book, but drawn from the depths of her pain. Lord, heal what no one can see. The pain that doesn't show up on scans. The emptiness science can't explain. Heal the body of the weak, but also the faith of the ones who are giving up. May this psalm find every person who needs to hear it. May the same God who found me now find the one who's hearing my voice. In Jesus' name, amen. If this prayer touched your heart, write the name of someone who needs healing in the comments. Share this video with someone you love, because sometimes the healing you're searching for begins in the prayer you say for someone else. Time passed. Not much, just enough for the flowers Rachel left with her note to dry, and the chair in room 512 to welcome new visitors. That space, now refreshed, seemed to carry an invisible fragrance, something between longing and reverence. The staff started to whisper between shifts that there was something different about that room, as if the atmosphere was lighter, as if the suffering that passed through there always found some kind of comfort. And then he arrived. The new patient was a man named Michael, 48 years old, sound technician, father of 2, diagnosed with advanced kidney failure. He had been through 2 hospitals and many sleepless nights before arriving there. Polite, but quiet. His eyes, though kind, carried the weight of someone who had already given up inside. On his first morning while waiting for tests, Michael looked around the room carefully. He noticed a chair by the window. On it, a white envelope. No name, just a single line. For whoever comes after me. Curious but skeptical, he opened it. Inside was a verse. Psalm 6 followed by a handwritten note in feminine, steady letters. Healing doesn't come when everything makes sense. Healing comes when you believe, even when you don't understand. He read it once, then again, felt a tightness in his chest that wasn't physical. Something deeper, as if suddenly, he wasn't alone, as if someone had left that message, just for him. Michael closed his eyes, and for the first time in months, he whispered a prayer. Not long, not eloquent, just one sentence. Lord, if you're still listening, show me, there's still something to believe in. In the days that followed, something changed. No, he wasn't completely healed, but his test results improved. Doctors suspended dialysis temporarily. His strength slowly returned, and with it, a new desire to live. When he was discharged for observation, Michael called over a nurse. Can I leave something behind for whoever comes next? She smiled. Of course you can. He took a piece of paper, wrote the same psalm, and added, faith is the hand reaching out, even when your eyes are blindfolded. He folded the note and left it on the same chair, then walked out of the hospital in silence. But inside him, something had started to beat again. No one knew that just days later, someone else would walk into that same room. But this time, she would enter in tears and leave with a promise. Room 512 was no longer just a number in the hospital. To those who passed by, it looked like any other door, but to those who had entered, it was an altar hidden behind white walls, a place where heaven had brushed against earth, even if just for a moment. Rachel kept coming back, not as a visitor, not as a patient, but as someone who knew the power of a mistake that changes destinies. She started walking the halls as a volunteer, bringing tea, soft conversation, and notes. Little slips of paper with quiet promises, left in unlikely places. Just as Grace had done before her. She never saw Michael again, but somehow, she knew he kept going, that he too had become a bridge. Because miracles don't end where healing begins. Sometimes, the real miracle is surviving the wait. One ordinary afternoon, while picking up forgotten sheets, Rachel heard footsteps behind her. A young woman in a pale blue lab coat stood there, eyes glassy. Hi, sorry, I walked into the wrong room. Rachel smiled, as if she already knew the story. Are you sure? The girl hesitated, took a deep breath, then said, no, now, I think this is exactly where I needed to be. Rachel reached out her hand. In her palm, a white envelope. No name, no title, just one line. Read in silence, and then pass it on. If this story touched you, write someone's name in the comments. Someone who needs healing, someone who feels lost, because sometimes the next miracle walks through the wrong door. and walks out carrying something the whole world needs, a promise.